We'll start with the biggest game of them all, I think, this weekend. I'm personally biased, I'll admit, but I generally have a pretty good record of betting the home team in college football specifically. The Texas Longhorns are a 1 point underdog, not at home. They're actually in Columbus. 1 point underdogs on the road. Total is 47 and a half in this one. Pretty cheap on a home team that just won the national championship, don't you think, Delonte?
Yeah, it was seen that way, but it's a lot of unproven commodities on both sides, I would say. But I think Texas has a lot more known at the most important position, which is at quarterback. Julian Sayin's taken over for Howard, who won a national championship. He does have somewhat of the same type of weaponry as far as receivers, one of the best receivers in the country, well, probably the best, in Jeremiah Smith and Carnell Tate as well. But I do think that I would lean Texas. I like Texas a little bit at the higher number. I knew we weren't going to get a 3, but I was hoping that we did. This is a rematch of the Cotton Bowl. Ohio State won 28-14. That score was pretty much misleading. I mean, they were tied 14-14 going into the fourth quarter. Jack Sawyer had the strip sack TD when Texas was going in and tied the game at 21. That was it was a pretty competitive game. We saw in that game Texas really do a great job limiting Jeremiah Smith, which is essentially what they're going to have to do here. And I think they have the personnel to make him work and force Julian Sayin, to beat them somewhere else. Now, they did not run the ball particularly well in that specific game, but they had been all year with their two backs who are in the NFL right now, Quinshon Judkins and TreVeyon Henderson. TreVeyon Henderson did have a 75 yard touchdown catch, but they didn't run the ball at all. Neither team actually ran the ball at all. And I think we're going to see a similar approach here with Texas. I think Texas is going to try. They got a brand new offensive line. Ohio State loses so much production on defense. They lose 8 starters. CJ Baxter is back for the Longhorns after missing last year. He had 650 yards and 5 touchdowns as a true freshman. So him coming back with Wisner. Arch obviously is the topic of discussion, and I think he's going to be fine. I don't think he'll I don't think he'll underperform. I think he'll do exactly what needs to be done. So I like Texas in the spot. I don't really want to. I want to get a little bit more than +1.5, or a little bit more bang for my buck on the money line. But I do think Texas kind of has an advantage here with Arch doesn't have the longevity as a season, but he started some games. He knows what it feels like to be, under the microscope, obviously, with his last name. And I do think Ohio State has more questions. Quarterback, they're going to take a huge step back at wide receiver. I mean, at running back. Now, wide receiver, they have the advantage over any team in the country just with Jeremiah Smith alone. So I think Texas did a good job limiting him before. One catch for 3 yards on 3 targets. So that's as good as you can get on the best wide receiver in the country. Now Texas does lose the two. They lose Jade Barron, who was the Thorpe Award winner, and they lose a lot of different pieces that they had in the secondary, but they're still stacked up front. So I think Colin Simmons will be a force on the defensive line. So all that to say, I would go Texas if I had to. Thankfully, we don't actually have to bet these games, but I think it'll be a great watch. We'll learn a lot about both teams, but Texas would be the only way I would bet this game.
Interesting. So, as a Texas alum, for everyone out there, in case you were wondering, at the real underscore G Warner, did attend the University of Texas and might be seeing this with rose, or in this case, burnt orange colored glasses. I'd like to hear a little bit what you think about Arch Manning coming into the season, because he's, to me, the most polarizing quarterback in all of college football, maybe all of the world. I don't think high schoolers really matter. NFL seems to be pretty established on who's good, who isn't. What are you expecting from Arch this year?
Yeah, so I'm expecting Arch to be a step up from what Quinn Ewers was doing. Now Quinn Ewers was a little bit he was underappreciated, I think, in a sense, and that kind of had a lot to do with Arch being behind him. But he was a pretty good quarterback, a pretty good college quarterback. Now in NFL, he was not that good for the Dolphins in that preseason game, but I'm expecting Arch to come in. He's going to add a dynamic that Sark hasn't had in a while, as far as a mobile quarterback who can, get out on the edge and run. We saw him have packages already for him, so he's got a full year, a full offseason to be the guy. I'm expecting him to come in, make the throws. His receiving core is a little bit down from what it was last year. But again, he's got a brand new offensive line. I mean, Texas generally has good offensive line play. So I'm expecting them to be a little bit better in that area as the season progresses. But I think Archer will come out and play really well, man. I think he'll use his legs a lot. this defense is ran by Matt Patricia, who's a new play caller in college. So we don't know what they expect with him as far as what kind of schematics he's going to bring. But I expect Arch to come out and ball. I really do. I'm expecting him to have, around 250, 260 passing yards and maybe like 30 or 40 rushing yards and maybe a touchdown on with his arm and a touchdown on his leg, simply because Sark, his play calling is elite. He's going to come out with an elite script. He's going to adjust. I'm not sure how the coordinators for Ohio State adjust. Brian Hartline never called plays. He's stepping up in a new spot. Obviously, a good recruiter. And then we talked about Matt Patricia, who hasn't called plays at this level. So I'm intrigued to see what kind of wrinkles they throw. But I do think Arch, to answer your question, I do think Arch has a really good game, and I'm expecting him to come out and do what he does, which is ball.
So my dilemma or my concerns are a lot around Arch because he really hasn't played much. Yes, he has started some games when Ewers was injured, and I honestly thought in that Georgia game last year in Austin that if he had played any sort of well, he would have kept that position and probably played the second half and then kept the starting role the rest of the year. I don't know how much necessarily that changes things, but he was so deer in headlights on that night at home, which is not in Columbus. Yes, it was a night game, which is a little bit different than, fortunately, I think for his biggest debut of the season start. I'm glad it's not a night game in Columbus, but I'm fairly concerned about his ability to throw the football. I mean, it seems like he's much more mobile than Quinn. And I hate to use the first name, so than Ewers, but to me, the difference here is not really knowing. I still think he's a very unproven commodity. I'm sure he'll be much better later in the season, assuming good
Yep.
health,
Yep.
than he
Yep.
is here. How much are you concerned about Ohio State at 11 a.m. Central Time, 12 noon Eastern, big noon, as some might call it? What do you think about the crowd then in the daytime versus at night?
Well, obviously, I think the nighttime just adds a lot more luster because you got to build up with the fans. You got all the tailgating and the drinking. So obviously, that is a bigger stage, I think. But if you're Ohio State is Ohio State at night, or there's obviously a lot more. The fans are a lot more juiced up. But at the end of the day, it's a hostile environment. I mean, but I don't think so. I don't value home field as much as a lot of others. But in these certain spots, this is the first game of the year. You would rather your I mean, he's a brand new quarterback. He's been in the system, but Sayin has not started at all. You know what I'm saying? So I would rather him start at home than away. And Arch has, his like you said, he's had his history of playing, but just not being the guy. So it'll be interesting. It's on both sides. But the thing that I would give Texas to like I would lean Texas way is because we've seen Arch at least in a college football setting. We haven't seen Julian Sayin in a football setting, and we haven't seen these new defensive and offensive coordinators call plays. So we know Sark. We know what Sark is going to do with the offense. We know what the running backs can do. We know what the wide receivers can do. So a lot more proven on the Texas side versus Ohio State. And Ohio State will have the two best players on the field at all times. They'll have Caleb Downs on defense, and they'll have Jeremiah Smith on offense. Usually, when you go into a game like that, you're probably going to win 9 times out of 10. But in this specific spot, I think after those two, I think you can rattle off all Texas players until you get to the next Ohio State player.
Cool.